rehearsed with a hot gun. Now,
but you were supposed to be cold.
Well, it was supposed to be cold or empty, but now, not only did I rehearse with a hot gun, I rehearsed with a gun that had a bullet inside. If that's what came out of this show, this is the most horrifying thing I've ever heard in my life.
Well, so yeah, and that's why I wanted to make sure that anytime that you shot a hot gun, you've never seen anything like this come out before.
Never.
Because I'm not familiar with prop guns. I can tell you what a projectile looks like, and that does look like a projectile.
But see, that's a bullet.
Alec Baldwin realizing during that interview that a bullet came out of the gun that he fired. It was just a rehearsal. They weren't even filming. This was a rehearsal. This hour, we're taking a deep dive into this story, trying to understand what happened, why it happened, what normal protocols are. I want to bring in a special guest. Joining me now from Florida, actor, filmmaker, musician, John Schneider. John, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Vinny, thank you for having me. I know we had some technical difficulties, but thank you for having me here. I appreciate it.
Shot looks great from Florida. You look wonderful. So let me start here. When you first heard about what happened on the set of the shooting of Rust, and you heard that there was a gun was fired and the director of photography was shot and killed by Alec Baldwin, what was your first reaction to all of that?
My first reaction was that Alec didn't check the weapon as he should have. I heard one of your guests earlier, and the notion there seems to be a notion that there are two sets of protocols, one for civilians and one for actors. There's not one or two different kinds of firearm education. So I just saw him cock the weapon right there. He cocks a single action Colt 45. That's not an accidental motion. Run that again. You see him, right? His thumb goes back, he cocks the weapon. All right? We are asked to believe. You can see that he's in a small room. We are asked to believe that during a rehearsal, as you have pointed out several times, and yes, he would be using the proper firearm during a rehearsal so they can get a look at it and see, how long it is, how the light shines on it, and all of that. So that's not unusual. What's unusual is that even if you were outside on a football field, he claims he didn't pull the trigger, okay? He cocked the gun. It's two parts. You cock the gun, you pull the trigger. It goes off. If you're in a rehearsal, you have no expectation whatsoever to hear anything from that firearm other than click, okay? So your expectation, that man right there, his expectation would have been to hear click. However, that's a Colt 45. That had the equivalent of a full load in it. It was loaded. It had a bullet in it. It went bang like you can't believe and would have pulled his arm back. The recoil on this particular weapon is such that when people hand it to you and you rehearse out in the shooting range, they say, be careful, that will take your arm off. Okay? So follow me with this. We are told to believe that an actor who expected click and got bang and fire and saw people fall down didn't know anything had gone wrong for 45 minutes. What planet is any of that possibly true?
She also went down, right? I mean, if she gets shot, two people actually got shot. She
got shot from this far away from, I can't do it on this screen, but she got shot point blank range. Now, when you do something like that, if you have blanks in a gun, which there's really no reason even to do that anymore, but if you do, you have a very thick piece of plexiglass like you would find at a bank teller, perhaps. for an additional layer of safety. There is never in anyone's film, in my history, I've been doing this since 1978. I've fired a lot of weapons. You don't ever have even a quarter load if you're that close to somebody. And I understand the shot. It's a very typical shot where I just did it. In the movie I have all this hair for. I just did that shot with a Colt Python. Very dangerous weapon. There was nobody behind the camera. There was nothing in the gun. When I picked up the gun, I checked it. Protocol is on the street and on the set and at a gun store or a gun show or anywhere, when you are handed a weapon, even when the person who hands it to you just proved it cold, you will, now it's in my hands, I will prove it cold again. And I will show those around me that it is indeed not loaded. It is impossible to believe for me that someone who has done more than one movie involving a firearm, and I don't know the actual number, but Alec has done a lot of movies involving firearms. It is impossible for me to believe that he is totally ignorant of protocol. And that seems to me to be what he is trying to convey in that interview. Whoa, not me. I'm sorry. You are responsible so that something like this doesn't happen. And you show the weapon to everyone on the set. Vinny, if you were to hand me a weapon on a set, you would say, hey, John, here's a single-action Colt 45. You'd show me the chamber. You'd show 6 cylinders that were empty. And if it was not someone's expensive gun, you would dry fire it, not 6, but 7 times to prove to me that it was indeed not loaded. I would then say, Vinny, thank you. I'd have the gun in my hand. I would prove it to myself and anyone else who wanted to look by spinning the chamber, showing them 6 empty spaces. Then I myself would fire it. It's not 6, but 7 times just to be sure. It's standard operating procedure. And we are also asked to believe that the prop man person, the armorer, the first AD, and Alec all neglected to check this weapon properly. Plus, when you're on the other side of the camera, and I am a director as well, I've had guns pointed at me to set up shots. You make damn sure, as the person on the other side, that there's nothing in that weapon. There is no world on a film where people are in such a rush, pardon the pun, where these protocols are skipped, because obviously people's lives are at stake. And this, at the very least, I believe this is criminal negligence.
Let me ask you about something else that has come up here, and it seems this is something that Alec Baldwin was talking about and the armor is talking about. We're talking about hot gun, cold gun. We're talking about dummy rounds. We're talking about blanks. We're talking about a live, an actual bullet. If you get that gun and you've got, would you check it for dummy rounds? Could you tell the difference between a dummy round and an actual bullet? If it was like that, what would you do?
You can, but someone would hand it to you and say, there are 6 dummy rounds in this weapon. And you'd say, prove it, right? Or you'd dry fire it. 6, 7, again, 7 to err on the side of caution. You would dry fire it. Now, people who own firearms, and I own many firearms, they don't like you dry firing their guns, especially if they're real Colts. This apparently was not. I think it was a Dakota. It was it's a copy. But if there was supposed to be dummy rounds in it, which are rounds that are fired, and the reason for that, Vinny, is when you are looking down the barrel of a gun like this, with a revolver, you can see whether it has anything in, like, you can see, wow. You can see whether it has anything in it or not. Okay, I'd love to be able to freeze that, but you should see the ends of dummy bullets in there. They are real bullets without any powder, so they're incapable of being fired. But that is an instance where you have even more safety protocols, because someone will dry fire that. They will prove that these are indeed dummy rounds and nothing can go wrong. Okay, so that argument actually makes it even harder to believe that no one really checked that weapon. This had to have been something that was done in a hurry, which makes no sense, because apparently, and maybe this is not the case, but apparently this was the first rehearsal after lunch. That's my understanding. Is that what your understanding is?
Yeah, my understanding is first one after lunch. The thing that we're showing, the thing that was the part that was actually filmed was I think probably before lunch. They broke for lunch and then they came back.
Well, then that footage would not prove anything, because that gun would be completely empty. It does make sense to have dummy rounds in a gun when you're shooting that close. That close.
Have you ever been on a set where there's been an actual bullet?
I have. It's been a long, long time since I've been on a set with an actual bullet. A long time ago, and not in this country. Okay? The only people who have live rounds on a set are security. There is no reason in the world for live rounds. So again, we're asked to believe that live rounds, blanks, and dummy rounds were all kept on the same cart. That is a violation of so many rules.
We have that cart. Let me show you the cart. We have the gun cart. We've got a photograph of it.
Okay.
Is that a mess, or is that normal?
That's a mess. That's an absolute mess. So there is people have said that people went out and they were target practicing during lunch. So I heard that. So if that's the case, then what the sheriff, and I did speak to the sheriff when this first happened, what I hope they did is they checked to see. So Alec comes in, it's a rehearsal. He cocks the gun or not, we don't know, and he says he didn't pull the trigger, but the gun went off and a projectile came out, a bullet came out. Okay. So here's my question. Was that the only bullet? Was that the only round of any kind in that weapon? Or were there 5 other ones? Were there 3 other ones? Were there 2 other ones? What we are asked to believe on another story I heard was that they were practicing with them, and lunch was over. You know, lunch being over is always a surprise on the set, you know, because it just is. So, you know, oh my gosh, half an hour, it's already gone. So we're told that someone who was firing that weapon left a live round in it from target practice, put it back on that cart you're looking at there, and then the armorer or the prop man or the first AD or all 3 went and grabbed a weapon out of that mess without looking or checking and handed it to Alec Baldwin and said, it's a cold weapon. I'm sorry, none of that makes any sense.
It doesn't.
It does. If this was a student film and no one there had ever made a movie before and someone's dad owned a gun store, then maybe. But my understanding is, I mean, obviously Alec's done a lot of films with guns. My understanding is that Alec's father was in fact or indeed a gun safety instructor. So for us to believe that this man is totally unaware of all things gun protocol, to me is a last-ditch effort for someone who knows they did something very wrong and very bad to try to push the blame off on someone else.
I'm hearing you. John Schneider, appreciate your time tonight, and I'm hoping that you'll come back after the DA makes her decision on this case. I'd love to hear your reaction when we do get the results.
Absolutely. I would love to. I would love to. I've got nothing against Alec Baldwin, but I love movies, and I don't want to see this be something that is a stain on the business that I love so much because of someone's attitude.
Gotcha. John Schneider, great to see you.
Benny.
Thank you so much. We'll be right back, folks.